Welcome to the Backyard Bouquet podcast, where stories bloom from local flower fields and home gardens. I'm your host, Jennifer Galizia of the Flowering Farmhouse. I'm a backyard gardener turned flower farmer located in Hood River, Oregon. Join us for heartfelt journeys shared by flower farmers and backyard gardeners. Each episode is like a vibrant garden, cultivating wisdom and joy through flowers. From growing your own backyard garden to supporting your local flower farmer, the Backyard Bouquet is your fertile ground for heartwarming tales and expert cut flower growing advice. All right, flower friends, grab your gardening gloves, garden snips, or your favorite vase because it's time to let your backyard bloom. Hey there, flower friends. Before we dive into today's episode of the Backyard Bouquet, I want to share something exciting with you. Have you ever thought about creating your own digital course? I'm talking about taking something you already know and love, whether it's gardening, flower arranging, or any other passion, and turning it into a course you can sell again and again. Sounds pretty amazing, right? Well, I've got just the thing to help you find out if you're ready to dive into the world of digital courses. My mentor, Amy Porterfield, has created a quick 2-minute quiz that'll tell you exactly that. It's called 3 Types of People Are Replacing Their Income with a Digital Course. Are you one of them? Amy has been helping people just like you and me create successful digital courses for over 15 years. She's identified 3 categories of people who can easily transform their knowledge into a profitable course. The best part? You don't need to be an expert. I took the quiz myself and was amazed at how spot on it was. It even gives you a few steps to get started if you find out you've got that course creating potential. And let me tell you, turning my love for flowers into something that can help others and bring in extra income has been a game changer. So if you're curious about whether you've got what it takes to create a digital course, head over to the show notes and click on the link to take the quiz. It's quick, it's free, and who knows, it might just be the first step towards something big. Now let's get back to today's episode. Today, we are thrilled to welcome Laura Ward from Blackburn Gardens, a charming micro-urban flower farm nestled right on the cusp of Old Town Mount Vernon, Washington, and the fertile lands of the Skagit Valley. Known locally for its hearty flower starts, cozy you-pick experiences, and beloved annual dried flowers sale, Blackburn Gardens has woven itself into the fabric of the community, becoming a cherished part of Mount Vernon's traditions. Laura, the heart behind Blackburn Gardens, has nurtured her lifelong passion for gardening into this thriving little oasis. From her bustling roadside flower cart to the magical 3/4 acre farm where she meets neighbors and shares blooms for every occasion, Laura's dedication to growing beauty and community spirit is something truly special. Laura, it's so wonderful to have you with us today. We're excited to learn about the magic that happens at Blackburn Gardens.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So your journey from dreaming about dirt and flowers as a child to creating a local garden haven is really inspiring. Can you share more about what it's like to bring that dream to life and be able to connect with your community?
Well, it's not something that I ever imagined that I would be able to do. My love of farming and dirt and the outdoors started when I was a child. I grew up on a typical suburban tiny plot. My parents were not really outdoorsy people, but my best friend lived on a farm, and I spent a lot of time playing with her on her farm. And I got to see what it was like to have a garden and farm animals. And she and I hatched a plan that one day we would live on a farmhouse on top of a mountain together. And it would just be this perfect, life with animals and land. And then, we grew up and she's not doing that. And I didn't think I ever would. I went to college and didn't even imagine doing flower farming, but just kind of stumbled upon it. So it's been very rewarding to see the community respond. We live in an area that is really supportive of small businesses. And when I first put a few things out by the side of the road. I was shocked that anybody actually wanted it. It was truly shocking, and it just kind of snowballed from there. So our property has quite a few fruit trees, and when we first moved here 9 years ago, I kind of obsessively tried to preserve all of it. I picked all the apples and all the raspberries and all the cherries and even the walnuts. Um, and it was just way too much to manage myself. And so that combined with the flowers that I happened to have blooming, which was just a tiny, compared to what I do now, it was just tiny, tiny, tiny stuff. That's what I first put out beside the road. I like to say that when I first voiced this idea to my husband, um, I had been kind of thinking about it in the back of my mind, but I'm a very reserved person. I am introverted. I am not a risk taker at all. So when I mentioned it to him, he's just the opposite. He's very extroverted and confident. Um, he loved the idea, and he's also a designer. So he really fast designed me a logo and a website. And then I was like, oh no, now I have to do it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy and very scary for me at the beginning.
So that was 9 years ago. You had this seed planted as a child from
Yeah.
your best friend's family that you never knew would actually start to grow all of these years later. Were you working in the garden industry prior to finding this house?
No, no. I actually majored in counseling. I got my undergraduate and my master's degree in counseling. And I did counseling while I was working through those programs. But then I had children and, life just happened. So I didn't ever use my degree formally once I was married with kids. I homeschooled my kids for 7 years. And uh, this actually really worked very well. This is year 6 for my business now. So my kids were quite little when I started, but it fits really well with a homeschool lifestyle. And, small children and medium-sized children, they just fit right in. And it's really a beautiful lifestyle to get to share with a family.
It sounds like it. So your children, how old are they now?
My oldest is a son, and he's 14. I have a daughter who's 12 and another son who's 9.
That's awesome. So they get to experience growing up on the farm, very much like you probably did next door. Well, was your friend next door to you or just in the same town?
She was across town. Yeah.
Okay. So you would go to her house and you just saw the magic of a farm. Was it a flower farm or what type of farm was it?
No, I would say it was a hobby farm. So they had chickens and horses and rabbits, and then her mom had a large vegetable garden that she would coax me and my friend to help in, and we'd dig potatoes and things like that.
Oh, how fun. And that was in the Skagit Valley as well?
No, that was in Ohio. I grew up
Oh,
in Ohio.
okay. So you moved across the country. What brought you to Washington?
Well, my husband and I actually met at university in South Carolina, and that's where we lived for the first portion of our marriage. And then he got an unexpected job offer out here with a company up in Bellingham. So it was just a really great time. It just was a really exciting opportunity for us to take at that time, and we did it. My kids were really little, but we made it across the country, and we are so glad we did. We just really, really love it here.
So you moved across the country and you found your current farm right away?
We did. We actually, because we were completely unfamiliar with the area, we moved in mid-August of 2015, and we rented an Airbnb for 2 months so that we could do some house hunting. And I believe the very first house that I actually just liked was this one. Our realtor didn't even show it to us because the square footage was like 100 square feet below the limit, the minimum that we had asked her to
Uh-huh.
set. But we happened to drive past it one day, just my husband and I, and saw a for sale sign, and we could tell it was vacant. So we got out and we just looked in the backyard, and as soon as I saw the land, uh, I told him, this is the house. I hadn't even seen the inside yet, but I just knew. So we had a realtor show it to us, and that was that.
That is so amazing. So, how much acreage do you have?
It is just under an acre, about 3/4 of an acre.
Okay, so you have 3/4 of an acre, and how much of your property is dedicated to farming?
I would say most of it, other than our house and our outbuildings. There, I've left some grass for the kids to play in, but a lot of it is being put to use.
That's awesome. So, you truly are a micro urban flower farm, is that correct?
That's correct. We are technically within the city limits, just barely. We are right on the line. So, yeah.
And so, you have a roadside flower cart. Is that in your neighborhood, or are you in a neighborhood? Or describe the setting. If someone was to come buy flowers from you, how are they going to get to your property?
Well, it's just the perfect scenario. We are located right at the end of the main street through the historic portion of our town. So that's First Street. You just drive straight down First Street until you're past all the businesses, and then some old houses start appearing. And then it's really where it intersects with the last road within the city limits. That's Blackburn Road, and that's where the name for my business comes from. We're right on the corner there, and it's a fairly busy intersection, which makes the flower cart work really well.
That is awesome. So, your farm is named after the street it's on.
Yes,
Okay. And it sounds like you must have great traffic and visibility for your farm.
yes, we do.
So, you moved in 9 years ago, but you started your flower farm 6 years ago.
Yes.
After moving into your property, what made you just decide to jump into flowers?
We had moved across the country, and that was very expensive to do. Um, our property here had this very large field. So we have a large field behind our house that was completely empty. And when I saw that, I knew that it needed to be a garden of some sort. A lot of the landscaping around our home at the time was fairly empty. It was nicely done, but not much blooming. And I just bought some packets of seeds and started them. And I really had very little experience of actually growing things. I had dabbled in it throughout high school, but this was my first chance to really do something significant. So I started lupin and a few other things, and they really took off. And after um, a couple of years, those had matured enough that they were really producing abundantly in my landscaping. And that is when I decided to try selling some of those flowers. I believe I also happened to have a few sunflowers and zinnias blooming as well that very first year. Um, yeah, it really just became, at the beginning, it was vegetables with some flowers. And I even had a CSA where I had a lot of neighbors who would buy vegetable boxes from me, and I would always include a little bundle of flowers with their vegetables. And over time, I realized it was the flowers that I really loved. And I came to despise washing vegetables. I spent so much time washing lettuce. And I thought, but flowers are so beautiful and I don't have to wash them. So let's do flowers instead. And I believe it was maybe 2 years in where I didn't grow any more vegetables at all. And I'm really glad I made that decision.
So, you started out with the intention of having a vegetable CSA
Mhm.
with flowers as like a little side a la carte bonus.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. And then you fell in love with the flowers or the simplicity of them compared to the vegetables. That is really neat. How did your CSA respond to you switching from vegetables to flowers? Were they disappointed? Were they happy?
They seemed to be very happy. And at that point, I had a lot of just daily, uh, what's the word I want? I had a lot of traffic at my cart at that time. It was not the flower cart that I have now. It was just a little rusty. Well, I started with a little rusty tea cart that had come with me from South Carolina. And then I graduated to a recycled electric spool, which came from a business right around the corner from my house. They just left them out at the curb, and I took one and I painted it and I put an umbrella in
Oh,
it. And that was my second roadside stand. But people really were right away very interested in whatever I put out there, whether it was vegetables or fruit or flowers.
That's so neat that you were able to make that transition over. So, when you decided that you were going to primarily focus on flowers, did you stick with the CSA or did you decide to expand your flower business from there?
I did try to replicate the CSA idea with just flowers, subscription, bouquets. And I did do that for a couple of years. I kept that fairly small um, because I didn't know. Well, at the time, I just was not very confident in what I was doing, which is, to be expected. I was afraid to commit and have people sign up when I didn't see how much I had available. Um, Now, the size and the amount that I am growing, I wouldn't be worried about that. But I've actually found that I don't have time or the need for a subscription bouquet service. There's enough going on otherwise that I don't need to do that.
Okay. So, you still have your roadside stand though, so people can still
Yes.
come get flowers. So, your model shifted from a CSA to what does your model look like now?
Well, I always tell people who are interested in doing what I'm doing, I had to learn the hard way that you don't have to do everything that you can do with
Mhm.
your flower business. I just assumed, oh, I have to go to the farmer's market and I have to take on weddings and all of those sorts of things. So I did do farmer's market in our town. We have a lovely farmer's market. I did that for several years. And I did discover that it just was not the way that I wanted to be spending my time with a young family on the weekends. It was on Saturdays, and that meant for me, I had to spend all day on Friday harvesting every stem and bundling and preparing, for that. So it was 2 full days committed to the farmers market. And when I told my husband that I was really thinking that I just wanted to drop that, but I was concerned about loss of income, he really encouraged me. He's been such a support and so wise through all of this. He just said, do what you want and what makes you happy. And it's okay if there's an adjustment period. But what we found was instead of going to the farmer's market, I decided, what is it that I really enjoy? And that is sharing my space with people. And I decided to open it for UPick. So I had dabbled in UPick while doing farmers markets. But once I dropped farmers markets completely, I transitioned to regular UPick hours at least twice a week throughout the blooming months. And that has just been so fantastic. There was no difficulty switching over to that as far as income. It evened out immediately. And I found it's so much easier. The the labor is eliminated and the joy is multiplied because people are craving the experience of
Mm.
getting to be in the setting. And that's really, really special to share that.
I really like a couple things that you said there. First of all, I want to acknowledge how great it is that your husband is on board and supportive of what you're doing. Because I think that's really important when you're doing something like this and starting a new business. Having that support of your partner makes a big difference because it can be a little risky
Mm.
to start a flower business or to take a leap and do something new in the business, whether it's flowers or something else. But there's two things that you said that really stood out to me. First, you said, you don't have to do everything. I think there's this misconception. People see all these pictures online. It's like, oh, I've got to grow those cosmos. I have to grow those marigolds. I have to grow that amaranth. I have to grow the dahlias. And all of a sudden you're in over your head.
Yeah.
And you said that you asked yourself, what is it that I really enjoy? And you discovered that that was the you pick. I think there's something really beautiful in that you are following what you're passionate about and growing what brings you joy versus feeling like you have this mindset that you get to do
Yes.
something. So can
Yeah.
we talk about your you pick? I would love to know more like how it's set up, how it's on your home and you have only 3/4 of an acre. How do you manage having people on your property? Give us the details.
Those are good questions. Well, it has been not always straightforward. Um, I feel like as I have been open for UPick for more time, that is years, word of mouth has made it, people are more aware. And so I have quite a few people, especially this year, that do show up unannounced, despite clear signage. And on my website as well, it's clear that it's by appointment only. So that has been interesting to navigate. My husband just put up a sign for me a few weeks ago at the end of our driveway to help communicate that it's private property. And within 48 hours of putting that sign up, someone still came right in. So it's kind of funny. And yes, you have to be okay with some of that happening. But in general, it's been great. I don't have a public restroom. That's probably the trickiest thing. So I just have to let people know there is no public restroom available, and we are very close to one. It's just 1 mile down the road on our river walk, so I can just direct people there, and it's not been a problem. But yeah.
So I like that you mentioned awareness. How did you initially build that awareness that you had switched from a CSA model to a UPick? I mean, that's a big change.
It is. I think that it really did just come down to, what do I want to be doing with my time? And it doesn't make sense to me to do something that is soul sucking. I wouldn't say vegetable or soul sucking. That's going a little far, but yeah, I guess pursuing what fits with your family lifestyle and with your own even personality. I have found that I'm not a salesperson at all. So being in a setting where I'm trying to sell stuff is stressful for me. And whereas being in my home, it's a safe environment. I feel really calm and relaxed here. And then I can share that with people, and I'm not feeling out of place.
How did you get the word out, though, that you were now all of a sudden a UPick flower farm? Did you do advertising? Did you announce on social media? Did you just put up a sign and people showed up? How did you get people to know that you are now a UPick flower farm?
I have an awesome husband who's a really gifted graphic designer. And so I have all of those services for free. And I know that's not typical for people, but he made me a really beautiful website. And so it's very clear on there. Um, and he made sure that Google search worked well so that it appears when people are looking for UPick flower farms in the Skagit Valley. And I always try to ask people when they find me, how did they find me? And that helps me to know what's working. And the website really seems to be the main thing that's drawing people. I do also have a large A-frame sign out on the corner in front of our house. Again, it's a busy intersection, and so people drive past a lot. We're also right next to 2 schools. And so during the school year, the traffic is, at certain times of day, there are a lot of people that end up actually just kind of stopped on the road in front of our house during car line. And that presents its own challenges where I have people watching me while I'm doing everything.
Yes, I get it.
But it really has worked well as far as visibility. So I did also one year, I want to say 2 years ago, we printed some yard signs and I stuck a few up around town. I don't know that those were very helpful. I didn't have anyone tell me they came because of that. I do think most of it is through my website and then social media connections.
Okay. Those are great. Thank you. I love that you mentioned the search engine optimization, because that is key for people that are searching online. If you're not visible, they're not going to be able to find you. So you mentioned that you are open by appointment only. Do you allow one person at a time, or do you allow groups in? How do you handle that appointment only situation for UPick?
I allow as many people to come as want to, as long as I know that I have the quantity to meet the demand. I am open typically twice a week on Tuesday evenings and Saturday mornings. And I have my website set up so that people can sign up and they prepay to come. So I know if anyone is coming on a particular night or morning, and I can plan accordingly. And if I have no one sign up for that night, then I have the night off and I close it off, on my, I use Shopify through my website, and I mark it as closed out and I go do something else. But then I also have people come for private U-Pick sessions. So if they need a time that's outside of those two standard U-Pick times each week, I always am willing to accommodate if it works. So I recently had a couple of bridal parties come on different days where they wanted to pick their bridal bouquet flowers, and they brought lots of people with them, relatives from all over the country and friends that flew in for their wedding. And that was really fun, just really special to share in those special events in their lives.
That's really neat. So I think it's really great what you said, that yours are appointment only, so you can plan and you know ahead of time if there's going to be people there. So you're not wasting your time, because as a mom of 3, you're busy outside of the farm too.
Yeah.
So you get to know in advance if customers are going to show up or not. It's not a matter of, I wonder if someone will be here today. It's either I've got clients coming, or I have the night off, which is a really great mindset and way of doing business.
Hmm.
So you mentioned that people prepay to come to your U-Pick. When they prepay, what does that get them? Does that give them entrance to your farm? Does that give them a set number of flowers? Do they get shears, a bucket to use? Can you tell us what that looks like?
Sure. Currently, I moved to a by the stem model, which is working really well. Previously, I had done it by the bucket. I charged a flat rate to fill a bucket that I provided for them to use while here, and then they would, for size control, and then they would take the stems home in their own container. But I found most people were very respectful and didn't try to cram too much into the bucket. I did have people occasionally take advantage. So I switched to standard $1 a stem. And I didn't know how that would go. I wondered if people would be less inclined to buy as many. My previous buckets they would hold around 40 stems. And so now it's $1 a stem. And so I just have tiers that people can pay 10 stems, 20 stems, 50 stems, or any combination to get the number that they want. And I'm finding that like 99% are choosing 50 stems.
Wow.
Occasionally less, but usually 50 or more. So that's worked out very well. It's been very interesting to observe. You're always having to observe what works and what doesn't work, and then adjust accordingly. But that's been working.
So when they're on your website, they're going to choose, I'm going to pick 20 stems, or I'm going to pick 50 stems at the moment. What happens if they get to your property and they pick 50 stems and they say, oh, I want more than that? Do they have an option to add more then?
Yeah, they do.
So you're present during the U-Pick?
I am, yes.
Okay. And do you provide them with shears or snips and a bucket at the time?
I do, yeah. So I encourage them to bring a bucket for themselves. I have a lot of people that forget. So I provide a bucket if they need it, and water, and then I have snips for them to use while here. So I don't send them home with anything other than the flowers that they cut.
Okay. And so when they get to your property, I am not a U-Cut. I primarily grow dahlias these days, and I'm not where I can have my farm open to the public at this time. So this is a whole new world for me, and I love learning about different ways that people can successfully run their farm. So that's why I'm asking a bunch of these questions, so that I can gain a better understanding. And I know a lot of our listeners are also interested in how can they run a successful U-Pick farm. One thing that always frightens me is the thought of people coming into my garden or my flowers and cutting a dahlia too short or damaging a plant. Do you provide any education before they get started on cutting?
Yes and no. I generally, a lot of people will ask, and then I'll tell them. I find that people almost never do anything that's actually damaging. In fact, the only time I had somebody actually be destructive was a child that happened to be a friend of my youngest at the time. This was years ago. And they were running through the garden together, just popping heads off of flowers.
Oh no.
It was my own son, who was contributing to the problem. But most people actually just cut them a little too short. So I encourage people cut long stems. And I haven't found that anyone has caused a problem. The occasional dahlia that's cut too short, it's not going to stunt the plant or cause, problems because I'm cutting so many stems constantly. The plants are well maintained.
Got it. So when they're not there with the U pick, you go in afterwards, maybe the day after, and you're going through and tidying up and deadheading and
Yeah.
pinching where they need to be pinched.
So I actually really almost never have to deadhead. I would say the only thing I deadhead is Cosmos because, it goes bananas. But I am moving a lot of stems enough that I'm using what I cut. And so I'm cutting pretty much everything that's blooming. There have been times in the past where I would have orders and I would fill the orders in the morning and cut literally everything that was in bloom. Everything that was mature enough to cut, I cut it, it sold, and I would have another round of orders. People would come to my cart or message me wanting more flowers. And I would think, well, I just cut everything that was cuttable this morning. I'll walk outside and see what has bloomed in the last couple of hours.
Uh-huh.
And then I would, scrape together something. I now grow enough quantity that it's not that close anymore. But yeah, what I don't actually sell fresh gets dried.
That's amazing. I don't know the source, so don't quote me here. But I remember once reading, and this was a few years ago, that on average, flower farmers have about a 70% waste of excess flowers that don't get used. I don't know if that's true or not, and I can't remember the source, but that's always stuck in my mind of that's a lot of flowers going to waste, and how can we use them? Which leads us into, you just mentioned, whatever you don't sell, you're cutting and drying.
Yeah,
So dried flowers are a big part of your business.
they are. And that also happened rather unexpectedly, just as a way of not having waste. If I had something that was not used fresh, I experimented with drying it. And I fell in love with making wreaths in the fall. And that was a great way to extend my income into the winter months. And I found that I never had enough dried product to meet the demand. And I also just loved drying flowers so much. So my drying shed is actually a very old, rickety shed that has been here, I don't know how many years. It was ancient when we got the property 9 years ago. And it was actually just an overflow junk spot, really, for landscape fabric and T-posts and random yard toys and all sorts of stuff that I was also trying to use to hang those few bundles, from the rafters. And it was becoming very frustrating to me to have to work around all the mess. And so 2 years ago, I decided I've got to just make this only for flowers, for dried flowers. So my husband and I cleaned it all out, and we had a friend who has a painting company. And he was able to just spray the interior white, which was a dramatic improvement. It had just been very old plywood. And it just brightened it up immensely, made it feel so much cleaner and ready to start something new in there. So, yeah, I started filling it up, and it was so pretty once once all the mess was out of there and the walls were white. It was so beautiful, and I would share photos, and people were just absolutely mesmerized with this little room that I had, and they wanted to come see it so badly. And so I hatched a new plan where I thought, what if I open this as a little store just for like a night or two, and just, would anybody come? I didn't think anyone would come, just like I didn't think anyone would buy those first few flower bouquets I stuck out by the road. But I had a huge turnout, and I sold, I think I was left with like 5 little bundles of flowers by the end of
Wow.
that first growing season.
And it was
By
all dried flowers.
all dried. Yeah. I mean, so many dried flowers. And I have since realized that I love drying flowers. I feel I feel like it completes the life cycle of a flower to start it from seed and nurture it and watch it grow and bloom and harvest those blooms. And then to just sell them fresh, I actually feel a little bit of sadness, like I haven't finished with them yet. So drying them feels like the final step for me. And then I'm ready. I'm ready to send them off. And I feel better about it because I know they're going to last for a really long time. So we actually we needed to do some repairs on this shed because it was so dilapidated. The roof was not going to make it much longer. And so we took the roof off this last spring and decided at the same time, since we're going to be putting a new roof on, we might as well make it a little bit bigger. So it is now put back together and filling right up. And I'm looking forward to opening it up again this fall for people.
We will have to include a photo in the show notes. If you could
Sure.
send me one of the dried flowers so everyone that's listening can see. I get the pleasure of seeing them behind you as we're chatting here. It looks amazing. Oh my goodness, the space is huge. So for those listening, can you tell us what kind of flowers are you drying?
I would say that my favorite flower that I grow is Strawflower. And of course, I'm drying a lot of it. It's so wonderful dried. I also dry Status. I dry a lot of texture. So I grow Auric and a couple different colors. That dries beautifully. Cress dries so well. It makes a really great foundation for a wreath. I have mountain mint and sea holly and a lot of amaranth. That is always really popular. People love dried amaranth. I'm sure I'm leaving things out. I've tried lots of different stuff. I should just look at my ceiling right now since I'm in my drying shed. Amobium is another really great one. Last
That's
year,
the little white
yes,
flowers, right? That are kind of related to Strawflower?
they're like little mini straw flowers. Yeah.
Yes, I love those.
Last year, I grew probably about 20 feet, a 20-foot row of Amobium because I had only trialed them the previous year, had a small amount, and I loved them so much. I told myself I must have more. So I went a little overboard and I grew 20 feet, 20 by 4. And I was just almost sick of Amobium because they are so generous. They just bloom and bloom and bloom, and you cut them and they just almost immediately will bloom again. So I cut thousands of stems and
Wow.
dried them all. And there was none left at the end of that year. They all sold. So that is a really, really fantastic one. I've experimented with other things like snapdragons. If I have any left over that don't sell fresh, I dry them and they're great. You know, they look really good. I've tried paper daisies this year for the first time, and I will be growing a lot more of them next year. They're fantastic. Dried. Larkspur is another really great one. It holds its colors so well. So there's a lot that you can do. I know some people dry dahlias. I don't. I don't need to do that. I have enough need for them fresh that I don't
Yeah.
end up with having them left over to dry.
Ever since I saw Hannah's book, Designing with Dried Flowers, I've just been amazed at all the different things you can dry and how beautiful they are. And like you said, that everlasting beauty of
Yes.
being able to preserve them. So, do you dry your flowers in your shed?
Yes. Almost everything that I dry is just simply by being hung in our shed. It gets quite warm in here because there are two south facing windows, but it doesn't get very bright at all. So it's relatively dark and quite warm. And here in Washington State, the humidity level is quite low. So it really is the perfect setting to dry flowers. I never deal with mold or anything like that.
That's amazing. So, when you dry them, are you harvesting them into water and putting them in a cooler and then hanging them to dry? Or are you just harvesting them and straight going from there to hanging them in the storage room?
A little bit of both. I would say it used to be if they weren't sold fresh, so they would have been harvested and put into water, maybe sat around a little too long to sell, and so then I hung them to dry. But nowadays, there are whole weeks where I'm just mostly harvesting straight to my drying sheds.
Great. And I've got a question for you. It's a selfish question about strawflower. Can you dry strawflower after they've started to blow open their centers? Will they still hold up drying?
So I have been able to. I feel like there's a window, and once they are completely blown open, I don't dry them. But I find if I cut them when they're halfway open, even 3/4 of the way unfurled, they will continue to open, but they have not yet turned. They're not going to turn into the fluff, that will happen.
Uh-huh.
But if they have gone completely open before harvesting, then they don't hold well dry. But I think they're beautiful like that. So if I miss any, if I'm not around and they bloom too much for drying, people love strawflower, and strawflower in mixed bouquets. People really go crazy for them.
Absolutely. Well, that's great because I have forgotten about my strawflower for the last few weeks as I've been trying to get all the dahlias staked and tied up before our winds come back here in the gorge. And I noticed this morning, I'm like, my strawflower are beyond what I would normally sell them to the florists, but they're about 3/4 of the way open. They're not fully blown open. So now tonight I've got to go out and harvest them because I'm glad you gave me that little bit of encouragement that I
Yeah.
could still dry them at this point. I mean, I have dried strawflower in my office here as we're chatting. I don't think you can see it from here, but it's 2 or 3 years old and it still looks great. A
Yes.
little bit brittle to touch, but it still looks pretty good.
Yes. They're special.
So, what is your favorite flower to dry?
It is strawflower. Definitely.
Strawflower.
Yes. Last year, my strawflower did not do incredibly well, and that was because I had had surgery the previous fall. So this would have been almost 2 years ago now. And in the fall is when I typically will put compost down on my field after everything is done, and then I cover it all with a tarp to help with weed seeds, to kill them all off so they don't germinate. And because I'd just had surgery, I wasn't able to do the normal stuff myself. So I had my kids do a lot of it. And at that time, I also decided to eliminate one entire row to make my pathways a little bit wider since I was now doing more U-pick. When it was just me, I didn't care that I had to turn sideways to fit through
Right.
between rows. But having people come, I realized I need a little more space. And so I decided to just eliminate one row entirely, which meant I had to shift over where I actually planted. One of the rows was moved over significantly so that it was now on top of what used to be an aisle. And my kids were the ones that did that, though. They shifted everything for me and they laid mulch down in the new aisles. And then I covered it all with a tarp. And I didn't think about it that whole winter. I recovered from my surgery and I was so excited to start planting. And I had my strawflower seedlings ready to go in the ground. I pulled the tarp back and planted them all. And as I was pushing them into the ground, I discovered mulch. There was a layer of compost. And then there was old mulch from my previous year's aisle
Oh,
underneath that row.
no.
And I thought, oh no, there's not enough nutrition here for the
Mhm.
strawflower. It was like half of the row was good soil and half of it had been previous aisle. And that was the year that the strawflower did not perform very well. And I was so sad because I didn't have hardly any left to dry. So this year I kind of went bananas with the strawflower, and they are just going crazy as a result. I have a lot of strawflower, and now I feel like I have just the right amount. I have enough to enjoy fresh and plenty to dry, and so I'm very happy.
That's awesome. When you dry the strawflower, do you remove the greenery, the little leaves around the flower?
I do not. I only strip them, I would say 2/3 of the way down.
Okay.
That actually just helps with airflow as they're drying, but
Uh-huh.
I don't remove any of the greens that are up close to the heads. And I've never even noticed them. Once they're dried, they just kind of disappear, um, maybe even just fall off. So
Okay. That's great to know because I probably overcomplicate it And I will sit there and I'll strip off all the little leaves. I'm like, this is a really time consuming process.
No, that's not fun.
No. Okay. Well, now I'm learning so much. So I'm glad to be talking with you today and learning this because now I want to go dry my Strawflower that's out there. I dry that, and status is my favorite thing to dry.
Yes.
I first learned about drying status. So I'm in my 6th year of flower farming, and I'll never forget. I'm pretty sure it was Heather at Petal Pink Flower Farm shared a video. She did a rainbow wreath of dried status.
Oh my
And
goodness.
that was when I first discovered there were more colors of status. And ever since I've been growing so much status, and I love drying status. It dries so
It
easily.
really does. Yes. Another one that I really love is amaranth. And I love the tassels of the longer amaranth varieties. I don't have as much of it this year, but I'm missing it, and I'll make sure to have more next year. But amaranth just does so well, even just by itself, or in dried arrangements, or in wreaths.
I have never tried drying amaranth. Can you do all varieties of amaranth?
I have. I haven't had
You
any
have.
problems with it. Yeah.
Okay.
It is a little bit tricky if you let it go too far before harvesting it, then it drops a lot of seed, which is just messy.
Yeah.
But in general, it does really well.
What about celosia? Because when I've tried drying celosia, it drops a ton of
Yeah.
seed. Does that mean that I'm letting it go too far, or that's just the nature of celosia?
I don't really know. I have not been able to grow celosia very well here. I have grown it several times and been very unimpressed. And I think that's just because we are just not hot enough here.
Mm.
Celosia needs a lot of heat, and I mm, I just don't have that, and I don't have a tunnel in which to grow those heat-loving things. So, celosia just doesn't make enough of an impact for me to dedicate any space to it, sadly, because it's so beautiful.
So beautiful. We've had so many days the last few summers in the 90s and hundreds that's probably why
Oh
my
my
celosia
goodness,
is loving it. It's a little late this year because I got it in the ground late, but it's starting to grow very quickly as we're heating back up.
that's
So,
fantastic.
yeah. So you sell your dried flowers at the end of the season, is that correct?
Yes,
Or because you open up just once for dried flower sales?
right. It ended up being twice that I actually opened my drying shed for a couple hours just on a Saturday evening. And that first Saturday evening, I wanted to limit the number of people that could come because it's not a very big space, and especially at that time, it was not. So there were a number of people that missed out because I had limited the number. So I opened it again. So it was for 2 nights, and I had a little bit left over after that I took to a market, like a 2-day Christmas market in, I believe it was very early December, and that was it. So I sell them as bunches. I wrap them in brown paper, and I also make wreaths, but I would say that the straight bunches are what sell the best. I don't make mixed bunches of dried flowers. I personally don't care for that. I like them to be just one variety together. I think that's just so beautiful.
Okay, so that's good to know. So you're not trying to make a dried bouquet of
No,
adding okay. Oh, that's so good to know. Again, I overcomplicate things because I'm so used to in the mindset of making CSA bouquets and putting things together. And I agree. For myself personally, you can see I've got a few dried flowers behind me. What do I have? I have bunny tails. Have you ever dried bunny tails?
I have not grown bunny tails, but I think they are adorable.
They're one of my favorites to put in wreaths. And then Nigella pods
I love Nigella.
and,
Yes.
and poppy pods. And then I have the orac. Oh, it's on the ground where unfortunately our listeners can't see. One of these days I'll start recording these in video. But I have cress, which
Yeah.
I almost don't even have to, the orac and cress, I don't even have to harvest and dry it. It literally
Yeah.
dries on the stem here because we're so hot and dry in the summertime. But it does turn golden. If you dry it in your shed, does it retain the color?
No, it
Oh,
turns golden. Yeah.
okay.
The
Which I think is
crest.
so beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. Am I correct? You also have a couple workshops with your dried flowers?
I do, yes. This is the first year that I'm doing a workshop, where I'm just going to teach people how I dry. I get a lot of questions about the whole drying process, which is why I decided maybe I should just have a little class. So that's what we'll be doing. Yeah, I'll show people my drying room and at what stage to harvest. Although honestly, I am not super picky about when, to harvest something for drying, other than Strawflower, being too far open. Most things are quite forgiving in the drying process. But I'll also show them I have a very simple, small commercial wreath clamp that I have had for a few years. It's really made my life a lot easier. And people are always really curious about how to use one of those and whether it helps to see one. I wish I could have seen one before buying one. I would have gotten one much sooner if I had seen how it worked. So I'll share that with them. And yeah, it's going to be fun.
Is that in person or online?
That is in person.
An in-person workshop, and that is at your farm at Blackburn Gardens, correct?
Yeah, that's coming up this month.
And what are the dates of your workshop?
So this weekend, actually, I will be having an in-person workshop all about dried flowers, where you can come and I will show you my drying shed, and we will harvest flowers together. I'll teach you what to harvest and when you're supposed to harvest it, how I hang things to dry, as well as other methods that I use for drying things that need different methods. And I will share my wreath clamp with you, and it'll be a great time. I would love to have you join me.
That sounds really fun. I wish I could drive up to the Skagit Valley this coming weekend. So for those of you that are listening right now, this episode is airing on Tuesday, August 20th. So your workshop is on August 24th. Is that correct?
Yes, that is.
And if someone is interested in joining, do they need a ticket? Do they just show up? How do they sign up?
You can sign up on my website. It's helpful for me to know ahead of time, so I can have things all ready for you. But yeah, on my website, there's a link to sign up for that workshop.
Perfect. And we will include a link in today's show notes. So if you go visit the show notes, you can sign up there. And then you also have a couple dates set for your drying shed open house. Is that correct?
Yes. So that'll be on Saturday, September 14th. I believe from 4 or 4:30, you'll need to double check on my website, through 7 o'clock in the evening. And again, on the 28th of September. And that is something that we do ask that you register for. There's no cost to register. You just need to let me know that you're coming. And that's available on my website. That is because it's not a big space, and we just want to make sure that I can accommodate everybody. So I believe the 14th is already filled up. But there's plenty of room for the 28th.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's been pretty exciting to see the interest.
That's amazing. So, wow, we have talked about a lot today, Laura. We've talked about your roadside flower cart. We've talked about your 3/4 acre farm and your U-cut and drying flowers. Is there anything that I haven't asked you today that you would like to share with our listeners?
Well, I would encourage you, if you are starting out flower farming, you're probably wondering, how do you find the niche that you want to really focus on. And I just want to encourage you, as I said earlier, to focus on the things that you really enjoy and that fit your lifestyle and even your personality. And that's okay if that means that you turn some things down. I found over the years that saying no to opportunities was not at all restricting on where my business went. It really helped to allow me to expand in the areas where I'm actually really gifted, and where people want the things that I have to offer.
That is wonderful advice. Laura, thank you so much for sharing so much wisdom with us today. For those who would like to follow along on your journey or learn more about you or sign up for your workshops, how can they find you?
Well, I'm on Instagram as Blackburn Gardens. I'm also on Facebook, and I also have a website. It's just blackburngardens.com. And at the bottom of my homepage on the website, there's a spot where you can sign up for an email list. I don't use it very much. I actually was just chiding myself about that today, thinking I really need to actually send out an email, instead of just once a year. So I will be sending an email out in the next couple of weeks to my email subscribers, but I promise I will not overwhelm your inbox.
Perfect. Thank you. It's so hard this time of year to keep up with the emails. There's so much I want to share with my listeners too, and
Yes.
our audience. And you think, okay, I'm going to do that email today. And then something happens and you're like, I'll do it tomorrow. And then all of a sudden summer's almost over. So, we'll look forward to joining your email list and following along on your journey. Laura, it's been such an honor and a privilege to get to chat with you. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us and your knowledge. I've learned so much about drying flowers. I'm excited to go cut my Strawflower after this. I would love to keep the door open for future conversations with you, and we'd love to have you back on the podcast.
Well, thank you so much. It's really been a joy and an honor.
Well, thank you. You have a wonderful day, and we'll talk again soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Thank you, flower friends, for joining us on another episode of The Backyard Bouquet. I hope you've enjoyed the inspiring stories and valuable gardening insights we've shared today. Whether you're cultivating your own backyard blooms or supporting your local flower farmer, you're contributing to the local flower movement, and we're so happy to have you growing with us. If you'd like to stay connected and continue this blossoming journey with local flowers, don't forget to subscribe to the Backyard Bouquet podcast. I'd be so grateful if you would take a moment to leave us a review of this episode. And finally, please share this episode with your garden friends. Until next time, keep growing, keep blooming, and remember that every bouquet starts right here in the backyard.